So what else is there here that's interesting to know? Well, we'll see that, of course, joints can just be posed in whatever fashion, much like Z-bones through rotations and whatnot. That's fine. However, translation of joints will also have the same effect as posing in that fashion. See, when I move this child joint around, it looks like the parent joint is rotating to point at it. But if you look at its actual rotation handles, you'll see that it is not. This joint has not rotated, and of course, neither has this one. What has happened is this one has translated, and it is the deformer which has rotated in order to make up the space between the two. And this, because it is the deformer which is affecting our mesh, still causes us to have this deformation effect. This is one of the great things that joints can do. You're not simply limited to having to rotate them to produce a deformation effect. You can translate and nudge child joints around as well, which can be particularly useful and powerful thing to do in certain areas for deformation, as we will of course see in time. This translatability, however, must also be understood and used properly. One quick way of rigging up, say, some kind of deformed skeleton out of joints, or maybe if you wanted to get clever with control mechanisms, you could jump over the rotations and just start snapping joints in the chain positionally to the next point, to the shoulder, to the elbow, to the wrist, and just translate them around, letting the deformers rotate. However, let's take a note here of what happens if you do that too much. I'll bring this child joint up here, and then I'm going to bring it across on the x-axis like this. Watch what happens as we cross over the parent. There we see our mesh flips. Look at that, nasty little pop. Why has it done this, you might wonder? Well, the answer is down to this whole rotation of the joint deformer. If we just switch to bounding box and take a little look at our joint deformer, you see as I'm moving it there, the shading is changing on the actual deformer part. Yep. You'll notice that joints and bones, when they are drawn shaded like this, they shade a little bit darker on their underside and a little bit lighter on their top side. When I say top side, that would be the side that had the bank pointing up when it was back at rest. What we're seeing here is something that's kind of non too dissimilar to what we've seen in the target and pole videos, where once you crossed over and you would get a flip, and so you would have to have a pole item to pull the third axis back around. It almost looks as if we've got a null and another null and something targeting between them, and this is that little flip that we get in targeting. And it looks a lot like that because that is pretty much what you do have. This deformer portion doesn't just work by magic, it is still working off of the whole base Lightwave system. It is rotating around in the space of this parent item, and it is still using Lightwave's normal rotational methods, and as such it is prone to gimbal lock and flip and so on. That means if you try and set up, say, an elbow on a character using just position to drag the joints around, then when you turn it past 90 degrees you're going to get a flip, which basically means it's a technique that you can't use because there is no way to take over the rotational control of this deformer portion. Can't be done. Therefore, translating joints around in this fashion to create bending deformations is not a good technique to use. Rather, you will still want to treat them very much like bones or other items where you rotate the parent rather than translate the child. The translation of children that you can get little effects out of is helpful for more secondary deformation effects, or effects where things don't need to bend very far. It saves you from having to use an extra bone or an extra piece of hierarchy or some other kind of control system. You've essentially just got it there built in the joint ready to be accessed. But when doing so, you must remember it's for smaller effects rather than grander ones.